that we just had. Now we go over to the second panel discussion here. Its topic is Crossing the Language Barrier in Latvia's Public E-Services. Please welcome on stage all the panelists. Gatis Ozols from the Ministry of Environmental Protection and Regional Development. He's the head of the Services Department with the Ministry. Gatis, please take your seat. Armands Magone. He already spoke in the beginning of this workshop. Armands is the manager or the head of the Cultural Information Systems Center. So please take your place in the panel. Cīrulis, the State Regional Development Agency, deputy head of the agency responsible for the e-governance. And the fourth panelist today in the second panel is Anita Dūdiņa from the Latvian Parliament, the Saeima Chancellery, and she is the head of the Information Department. There we had the Andres Vasiliev's presentation in the morning in which he spoke about the need to have the information available in native language. One of the areas where native language is very important is e-services, e-governance. The European Commission has looked into the issue, and that's why the Commission is now working on CEF infrastructure, or this automated multi-language infrastructure. But there is a wonderful example which works quite fine and has been very efficient for the public administration or public management here in Latvia. Automated tools are being used by our governmental agencies, thus bringing down the barriers, language barriers, between the public institutions. And now I would like to turn the floor to Gatis Ozols to talk about the context in general, to introduce the Latvian sort of situation or the perspective with regard to public e-services, availability of those, and the response to those or the take-up of those. So please, Gatis, the floor is yours.
Thank you and good morning. A brief overview or insight into how we're doing with the e-services cross-border-wise. Let's begin with some matters that many of you might know already. A colleague from the private sector mentioned that Latvia is one of the countries or places for using digital opportunities, and here you can see the arguments why. There are some things that we can take pride in, and some of them is that our internet is very quick. We rank among top 10 and in the speed. And in terms of costs, as a result of competitiveness, we can actually do without counting megabytes at the price of some mere 10 euros a month. And even those who don't have broadband at home or don't use internet at home, we have more than 800 libraries provided with free of charge internet with both optical, wireless cables as well as the cabled ones. And you can use internet there and use many opportunities there. We ran a campaign recently where we think that we were able to engage government authorities, because 60 authorities engaged in the Days Without Queues activity and actually tried to inform people about how they could use various services electronically. We are quite good consumers of the online content. According to statistics, Latvians read news online and use social networks, but we are glad that we're not only entertaining ourselves online, but we are also ready to trust systems in terms of some more sensitive services, such as online banking. We rank 8 in Europe in this sense. And the government authorities also try to walk in lockstep with the time. The digital access is determined as of the fundamental rights of our citizens, so both government and municipal authorities are obliged to accept queries and respond to them, and we also engage the postal service and gas and other utility services provide electronic communication using e-signatures. Entrepreneurs are also among the most active ones in Europe who are using digital opportunities. So the vast majority of them, or probably all entrepreneurs, use them. And we rank 4 among the most active entrepreneurs who make use of online options. I'm not going to mention all of the opportunities that are more than 260, because that would mean that we will need a 3-day seminar. But all entrepreneurship-related activities can already be carried out online, and state the revenue service provides no other options than to submit tax returns online. And you can use online services at universities, review and pay administrative fines, and apply for licenses in municipalities. And apart from these administrative services, we have also created a lot of useful content during the last 7 years. We have digitalized the cultural heritage materials, the photographs, maps, and so on and so forth. I'm not going to go into greater detail. In other words, in all areas of life, we can find some kind of e-options or e-services to avoid going to the authorities physically. Now, we have also shaped various pilot projects in collaboration with our neighbors. So the idea is that the bigger the distance, the bigger the benefit. In some cases, we certainly talk solely about the benefit, but we certainly have great incentives to cooperate cross-border, and the potential here is even greater. We have collaborated with our Estonian and Lithuanian colleagues, and we are running several pilot projects. As a result, we came up with an opportunity for inhabitants of Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia to sign electronic documents using inhabitants' e-ID cards. We have come up with this European e-document, and using your colleague's e-ID card, you can sign our documents, and using our IDs, you can sign their documents. So we have this cross-border cooperation, which is successful, and thus we have made steps to decrease or diminish these technical barriers. Soon we plan to supplement the scope, or so to speak, to expand, so that we don't have only Lithuania and Estonia on board. Generally, how do we look in the European context in terms of the public services, the accessibility of public services across borders? So we have the government benchmark, and the government benchmark, cross-border mobility benchmark, studies these just to elicit how these services are available. So you have groups of services or areas of life that are being measured, and the European general is currently quite low. It shows that generally it is 48% that are available for people outside of their home countries. What we see is still many technical and administrative burdens or barriers exist that prevent us from using them full-fledgedly. So For example, where do we use these things cross-border? For example, the Services Directive puts down that services must have a single one-stop shop, this access point, so you can access services in one country. For example, if I want to start up a business in Poland, then I go online and I find out what I need to register as a company, either a new company in Poland or just to implement my business activity cross-border. And then I find out what kind of licenses I need and what documents I need to fill in and submit. But you know, this has been in place for several years, but the information availability and administrative matters have not been running as smoothly as expected. But within the scope of this, the authors have been studying what are the biggest barriers that prevent cross-border use of services. And great was my surprise that working with the EID, cross-border cooperation, and so on and so forth, the biggest burden or barrier is language issues. This is language related. So what could it be? What could it be linked with? You have the primary information not available online. So how can you ask something specific to be there? Portals typically offer information in English, additionally to the member state's official language. But if we want to access information in Latvia or another member state's language, then the access is quite limited. So the discussion previously was about the fact that you can't interconnect all languages individually, engaging translators, so you have to find ways how to tackle this. Certainly this will not become easier, and this was mentioned today. So we have the digital single market strategy, which lays down greater collaboration, greater cooperation to tear down the barriers that need to be torn down as in the present, and then we also need to bring them down online. And one of the reasons for this might be the EID, and the other might be language matter, and then there might be other other reasons. The EEDAS regulation has been adopted recently, and why is that important? It is going to apply to the public sector and also to the private sector. This means that banks and insurers will be able to identify their clients cross-border, provide them with services, and so on. This all means that we have to become more and more ready to work in this common or single Europe, and this will serve as the ground or become the centerpiece to succeeding at our efforts. And we also saw this challenge during our presidency. And our country, in collaboration with the European Commission, must work towards enabling all inhabitants to work in their mother tongue. And when planning the next periods and next projects, we have to keep in mind that our country does not end with our national borders. We have to be ready to work online in terms of our public services and websites. And if we don't have enough funds to hire translators or interpreters, but you know, initial information can be acquired using automated services. So I would like to encourage to work together not only technically but also content-wise in our European single market. Thank you. Thank you. Got this? Got this? I know that during the presidency, you frequently presented the presidency's guests and international audiences with our online services. So were there any services that seemed especially interesting to our guests? One of the brightest examples and the most recent examples was related to the fact that our entrepreneurs no longer need to provide statements physically, but they can be retrieved instead from automatic registers, and procurement committees make use of them. Another thing was a thing that maybe Anita Dūdiņa can comment, and it was as follows: the openness of the governance of state authorities was provided great. So you could follow along how the deputies work and how the legislation is being processed and so on. One thing that was provided during the presidency also was the foreign government. In the booklet, you can also you see 2 pages that are dedicated to this this matter, the Hugo LV. And Armands Magone is the co-organizer of this e-service that facilitates tearing down language barriers or dismantling language barriers. And Hugo LV was nominated in the World Summit Award in the government category.
Tā, Armand, tad varbūt varētu pastāstīt vairāk par.
Could you please fill us in on the machine translation technology, its development, how it originated, how this idea was conceived, and what it means to us today? So hello again, welcome again. Now, what concerns machine translation, I should probably start by filling you in on the history of it all. As I already mentioned, we're digitalizing the collective memory, the cultural heritage here in Latvia, and of course language has a very prominent sort of place in the whole sort of hierarchy of the heritage, digitalization and collective memory and culture resource digitalization. We had a wonderful opportunity to attract EU funds for that. We really benefited from the EU financial support in development of this tool that is widely used in the public administration and translation of public documents. And we sort of jumped to this opportunity. We took the chance. We created Hugo. It's not an abbreviation of something very complex, complex linguistic theory. It's just a name, basically, which in Latvian as well as in other languages sounds pretty similar or the same and is understandable to people of different language background, although the pronunciation may differ. But to us, it seemed to be a very short, very concise sort of a name for something beautiful, and other memory portals and other culture portals have similar names, like Diva, for example, is the name of one of the portals. And sort of this was our departure point, and this is why we decided to sort of opt for a very easy, from the user's perspective, very convenient portal. Well, it's for you to judge, of course, how convenient it is. It's for the public officials to judge that. But I would like to thank Gatis personally, because he was the one of the few people who had the courage to make sure that the Latvia.lv portal includes the machine translation tool as well, and that it is operational as well. And it is a wonderful tool that enables the foreigners, those speaking other languages, to translate and understand what is available on our government portal, the Latvia.lv. As Edgars mentioned, machine translation will never never substitute the translator or interpreter, but it nevertheless enables people to understand the contents of various texts and portals. So that's its role and purpose. Now, let me focus now on the future instead of the past. What's the future, what the future holds for Hugo in the next programming period that is already 12 months in progress, but not all of the projects intended have already been launched. Now, here's the ICT sort of governance system, and different platforms available or included in the governance ICT system. So here are some of the platforms that will be developed over this programming period until 2020. There are 18 platforms altogether, and Hugo is one of them that will be further developed or expanded, elaborated. Then there are different translation tools, various language technology tools, as well as corporate development projects that will be supported in this programming period. Now, going back to Hugo, there are several things or several sections of this tool that will be developed in nearest future. So we'll try to integrate it closer with other government or governance portals. I suppose that greater number of portals will include Hugo, this machine translation tool, and we will also continue deeper integration of Hugo in the Latvia.lv portal, and we will continue developing the functionality of Hugo in order to enable Hugo to translate more things that we initially sort of started out with. We'll also make Hugo mobile, if you will. We'll develop a mobile app for Hugo. And we will also focus on proofreading and editing of the translated text before including them into the Hugo tool. And we will work with translators in order to suggest a better sort of translation. And we must continue working on the integrated translation memory. That would be a sort of a database or a data storage or repository of translated texts, so texts that are being translated. So basically, translation memory will give you several possible translations. You'll be able to browse through those translations, and that would avoid repetition. I mean, that would eliminate the necessity to retranslate the texts that have already been translated. We'll continue working on other sort of auxiliary tools for this translation software. These CAT tools, I mean computer-assisted translation tools, will be used as auxiliary tools in the Hugo machine translation software, because a lot of translated text, a lot of phrases, are sort of set phrases that can be entered into or added to the translation memory, therefore eliminating the necessity for a translator or for an institution using this tool to retranslate or repeat translation or redo the translation of texts that have already been translated. So basically, we're going towards automation. And we would like to get greater exposure of those corpora as well. I mean, we would like to make them publicly accessible, widely accessible. That's a very important task of ours in order to boost the usability of those texts or the corpora. I mean, they have to be easily accessible, convenient in use, and, publishing or opening this corpora to the public would be a part of our, tool development project, Hugo development project, machine translation tool development project. So we believe that we still don't have real open access corpora freely available for use. So I would say that that has to be improved. There's no doubt about that. And then there are several other things, that we need to do with regard to specialized corpora. We have industry or, different specialized corpora for different areas or fields of life. We have identified the experts who might assist us in developing the specialized corpora. We have a great demand for other languages. Unfortunately, due to the scarcity of resources, and namely financial resources, we have not been available to sort of broaden the range of languages it operates with or on, most probably will have to sort of find additional funding resources for particular areas. For example, French, German language, sort of translation, machine translation function might be developed for particular industries. And a very important nuance. We'll try to create a single sort of repository of documents, translated documents, or bilingual if you wish, or multilingual pairs of documents, because, you know, that's the future for our tool as we see it. So that's our future outlook or perspective. But, you know, again, for me, language technology is all about application. And, you know, I mean, language resources, machine translation tools have to be used on an everyday basis. That's the sort of technological advancement that we see, that we think will happen in future. And sometimes, however, this technological advancement deviates from the needs or from the wishes. We, at least at the government level, try to make sure that, you know, these tools, technologies, resources are sort of fit for everyday situations, that are not that they are not serving only scientific purposes. Thank you. Thank you, Armands. Hugo.lv is a vivid example of how language technologies and machine translation tools can bring down the barriers in public administration communication, I mean, or the communication between the public institutions. Hugo.lv has a number of advantages. It allows to translate texts, portals, documents, and web pages, and it is also easy to integrate it with other government portals. That's another advantage of it. And Armands mentioned, you know, one of the portals, which is a sort of a very good introduction or a segue to the next presentation. You know, Hugo is a part or is integrated in Latvia.lv. Now, the advantages of this integration is the subject of the next presentation by Edgars, Cīrulis, the representative of the State Regional Development Agency. He will talk about Latvia.lv and Hugo.lv and the integration between the two. So please, Mr. Cīrulis, the floor is yours.
Good morning, everyone. I will try to be concise, and I will try to be as practical as possible as opposed to technical. I will try to tell you about how the solution developed by Armands is integrated in the state portal Latvia.lv. Let me begin with outlining the necessity, why we understood that the machine translation is the solution that should be integrated in the service platform. This is a combination of several factors that determined the idea that the introduction of the solution will enable us to make better use of our resources. One of the aspects was that the portal Latvia.lv has been, since the outset, provided in 3 languages, that is Latvian, Russian, and English. And the content of the portal does not have only one person in charge or responsible for this the content. The content is made by the various organizations, such as the Ministry of Environmental Protection and Regional Development and other ministries. So the content cannot be definitely controlled. It expands, it increases, and sometimes in particular situations, it exponentially increases. The type of the way how this information is presented technically and how it is stored and on the site is different from that of websites. Because it is managed in the CMS system, the content management system, and then there are some elements that are not in the CMS. Therefore, various technical limitations occur, and other technical necessities occur for managing this and providing a translation. Another important aspect in terms of adopting a decision on introducing the Hugo .lv solution was the cost of translation, which would be very significant if we chose to translate the content in the traditional way, and it would also require great staff resources. Now, shortly about the situation that exists now and how the Latvian population and inhabitants see it, and those who come online on the portal right now. Right now, the Hugo.lv solution has been introduced on Latvia.lv in the pilot mode, because currently the translation of everything and for everything has not been introduced yet, and the functionality has not been introduced in an adequately high level. We are currently testing how this thing works, and based on what we find, we want to progress ahead. The current situation is as follows. Machine translation is used for translating large part of the information available on Latvia.lv. To be accurate, the information that is provided in the service management system. E-services information and terms of use are not being translated for the time being. Also, various content that is planned to be translated in the nearest future is not covered yet. As for the near future, we have implemented or launched the phase 2 of the integration between Hugo.lv and Latvia.lv. But I think that within the maximum of 2 months, we will carry this out. And as a result, machine translation will be used for everything that hasn't been translated manually yet, except for e-services. And the e-services related information will be tackled and covered in the next phase. And currently we have launched planning regarding this phase, and we are looking at the next year when we are going to carry this out. As for the advantages that we have observed, as I mentioned, we have tested this in reality, that we certainly save resources this way, and employees can instead focus on other things. This, in turn, gives us a great value added in performing other tasks. Another thing that we have observed is that the quality of translation provided by Hugo.lv is much higher than that of public services, say Google Translate, Microsoft, and indeed what was shown during the presentation, it provides higher quality. We have become sure of this fact. So that would shortly be all on my part. Thank you, Edgars. Yes, thanks to the integration of Hugo.lv into Latvia.lv portal, users can translate information into Russian as well as English. Thus, those who are say, residing in Latvia have access to services. They can read about them. They can access information, and that makes it easier for them to communicate with the government and use government-related services. We are indeed happy about how Hugo.lv can be integrated in portals and platforms. It was mentioned that Hugo.lv will also contribute to the European Automated Service Framework, the CEF. And authority for whom this multilingualism aspect is very important is the Parliament of Latvia. We have translators, interpreters working there. We have the MPs who need translations during the study and research phase of various legislative documents. So how does the Parliament use translation technologies, and how does the Parliament use Hugo.lv, and how could the Parliament use it even more so in its routine work? So about all of this, Anita Dūdiņa will provide you with an insight, and she represents the Parliament of the Republic of Latvia. I would like to mention that probably you have many questions. However, there is little time left for this panel discussion. However, this discussion will be followed by a coffee break, so you will be able to ask all of your questions to all of the panel discussion members during the break. Hello, colleagues. Today we are listening about the linguistic diversity in the European context and the entrepreneurial context. However, I would like to mention that linguistic diversity is the foundation of national parliaments, and in terms of parliamentary cooperation, we are not talking only about Europe or the Baltic Assembly. We're not talking only about the Conference of the Baltic State Speakers. We also mean the IPU, the International Parliamentary Union, which unites almost 200 national parliaments in all continents. And formally, lingua franca in this parliamentary environment is English, but actually the real cooperation calls for various translation tools. And parliaments certainly have various structures and they have different organization schemes. They have different traditions and histories. However, they are all united by core principles. And these are the classical functions that parliaments must do. This is the legislative process, the supervision of the executive power, and the engagement of the society, as well as international representation. So if the Latvian parliament knows what it's doing and so on, but in the international context, it is important to know what solutions are being used in other parliaments, and also in the recent decade, the international cooperation has become very topical for the Latvian parliament by engaging in various twinning projects, and parliamentary relations at the employee level has become topical. And these informal things that you might not see because they are lighter are the parliamentary organization procedures and processes, human capitals management within the organization. I represent the board that is responsible for collecting information for the parliament and ensuring employees with the necessary information, parliamentary cooperation and transfer of experience or transition of experience, and also the work of committees where deputies or MPs work with documents or drafts that mostly come from the executive power, which has greater resources at hand. And in these routine processes, we have loads of information that comes from the databases of other countries' parliaments, or international think tank environments, or academic or maybe non-academic research. And most probably this information is not in Latvian, so we have to work with these texts somehow. If we relied only on the professional translators and interpreters employed by the parliament, then they would either be working for more than 24 hours a day. So we need a solution for that. And here I have outlined the documents, the texts, and the information that is included in the Parliament's everyday routine practical work. So these are the working documents that supplement legislative processes, informative background materials, news, texts, interviews, both in the printed press or multimedia environment, research studies conducted by institutes, and searching and analyzing of this information is carried out by MPs, their assistants, as well as more than 200 employees that, according to their competencies, do one task or another. So this informal massive information is quite a vast one. Then we also have letters, emails, attachments that are contain very serious things, maybe less formal things, and then there are certainly documents and texts and areas in the parliamentary routine, say as the diplomatic things, diplomatic content, where you need the presence of translators and interpreters and the responsibility for what is carried out. And then you also have these background materials where you can apply automated translation, and we have this technical capacity. This also relies to the websites of other parliaments. Back in the day, some 2 decades ago, when I was a newcomer to the parliament, and we tried to seek and find out how to shape the parliamentary routine of other countries. So, and such a within the scope of this, I went to visit Sweden, and then I came across their intranet site, and then I asked them, how come it's available only at Sweden, in Swedish, not in English? And they replied that we are paid by Swedes, and we are accountable in front of before the Swedish government and the Swedish society. So if you can't read it, it's your problem. So in other words, you have lots of information that is publicly available, but we can't access it because we lack language skills. And then again, these automated translation tools would be very, very fit for this purpose. As I mentioned already, I think that the Latvian parliament has developed during these 25 years with its visions and traditions and opportunities to help and assist other countries' parliaments. I have worked as an expert for the last decade, and I have been able to share my experience with the colleagues from other parliaments. They have asked, yes, you have your internal rules or procedures, but they are in Latvian, and maybe some of them have been translated into English or Russian, but this is where our cooperation ends, because these stacks of internal rules cannot be really transferred or translated into other languages. This would certainly give another opportunity for work for translators and interpreters. However, it doesn't always solve the problem. So here you can see the intranet of our parliament. I take pride in what we offer right now. All of those people who come to the parliament and visit our library can access this on the computers. So basically, this is the parliament's electronic working environment, and everyone accesses it. Who works there. Why isn't it public? Well, there are certain limitations. We have the BNS and Leta news agency information, which can be used only for internal purposes, but then again, it has a lot of information providing there. And one thing that you can notice here is that Hugo successfully resides here as well. I do not have statistics for how much this tool is used or this solution is used, but in any case, MPs have an opportunity to use it. So do their employees. I have a couple of contemplations and ideas that I came across when I read a couple of magazines. For example, I read at Forbes.com a vision about the 20 dangers that we are to expect regarding especially big data. So the statement that was made there was that during the last 2 years, more data was created or generated than in the previous history of humankind, and the anticipated or forecasted data generation speed in 2020 is about 1.7 megabytes per the inhabitant of the planet, and currently less than 0.5% of all data is currently analyzed and used. So if we put this all together, then we can only imagine what kind of abundance of information we live in, and how few scarce resources and sieves do we have for analyzing and understanding this information. And after applying our language skills and the abilities to use languages, and we consider this 1.7 megabytes per second, that they will not be in Latvian, then the ability to read in other languages will be crucial. I am a realist. During the last several years, I have delivered speeches at various conferences, and here I can speak Latvian, and I'm glad to see here that not many of you need translation from English into Latvian. However, in the future, if we want to preserve our self-respect or self-esteem, then we will need to use machine translation. I do not represent the Parliament officially here. This is my personal insight and opinion in terms of the knowledge management area. And what my vision would be, this would be a user-friendly, a quality assuring and cheap automated translation tool for text. A story from my life. About 10 years ago, one parliament in a civilized European country, which had a library, and it encountered a legal dispute with, say, a publication, because without coordinating with the publication, they had copied an article and provided it for the parliament. So then this resulted in lengthy litigation. So while we still are Xerox copying, photocopying articles from newspapers and magazines, then we're still on the safe side. So the perspective that I would really love to look forward is automated audio translation, audio interpreting opportunities that I would love to access in the language I understand, sitting comfortably in my cozy slippers and understanding it the way that the speaker who delivered the speech would. And this, I think, would diminish this gap between information-rich and information-poor. Thank you, Anita, for your presentation. I think during this panel we heard about the challenges of multilingualism in e-services and Latvia's solutions for overcoming language barriers, namely the Hugo.lv and the integration of Hugo.lv in the portal Latvia.lv to make it even more user-friendly. We also heard about the multilingualism challenges that our parliament encounters.